There's one move Niccolo Machiavelli wrote about 500 years ago that still works today to make people respect you instantly, and it goes against everything you've been taught about earning respect. I've watched this principle transform ordinary people into natural leaders, turn overlooked employees into decision makers, and help quiet individuals command rooms full of powerful people. But here's what most people get wrong. They think respect comes from being the smartest person in the room, or the most helpful, or the most likable. That's exactly backwards. The move I'm about to share with you is counterintuitive, uncomfortable for most people to execute, and probably nothing like what you expect. You'll understand why most people struggle to get genuine respect, discover the psychological principle that makes certain people naturally magnetic, and make sure you subscribe with notifications on. I share strategies like this regularly that most people will never discover on their own. Let's dive into Chapter 1 and learn the exact technique that separates those who get overlooked from those who get obeyed. In the next few minutes, I'm going to break down this one strategic move into 5 specific steps that you can start using today. If this resonates with you, hit that like button because it tells me you're serious about leveling up your influence. Most people destroy their chance at respect within the first 30 seconds of any interaction, and they have no idea they're doing it. Machiavelli observed this fatal flaw in his time, and it's even more prevalent today. You walk into a meeting, a social gathering, or any situation where you want to make a good impression. Your instinct tells you to smile broadly, agree with what others are saying, jump in with helpful comments, and show everyone how friendly and accommodating you are. You think this builds rapport. In reality, you just signaled to everyone in that room that you're not a serious player. Respect grows from demonstrating that your attention, your agreement, and your approval have value, which means they can't be given away freely. When you rush to validate everyone around you, you're unconsciously communicating that your validation is worthless. The person who commands respect is the one who remains centered regardless of the social dynamics around them. They don't need everyone to like them because their sense of worth isn't dependent on external validation. The mistake is this: you're trying too hard to be liked instead of respected. But here's the nuance most people miss. He wasn't talking about being cruel or aggressive. He was talking about commanding natural respect through strategic restraint. The people who get genuine respect understand something crucial. Respect and likability operate on completely different psychological principles. Here's what happens. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is much safer to be feared than loved. Think about the most respected person in your workplace or social circle. I guarantee they're not the person who says yes to everything, laughs at everyone's jokes, or goes out of their way to make others comfortable. The respected person is the one who speaks with intention, maintains their standards, and doesn't scramble to fill uncomfortable silences with chatter. The fatal mistake is believing that respect grows from accommodation. It doesn't. This shows up in specific behaviors that kill respect instantly. You interrupt your own sentences to ask, "Does that make sense?" You apologize before stating your opinion. You laugh nervously when making serious points. You immediately agree when someone challenges you, even when you know you're right. Each of these signals to others that even you don't take yourself seriously. Machiavelli's insight was that true authority comes from psychological positioning, not from trying to win popularity contests. Here's the move that separates amateurs from masters of respect: knowing when to stay silent. Machiavelli understood that silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a weapon of influence that most people never learn to wield. Someone asks a question, and hands shoot up before they even finish speaking. Everyone's racing to fill the space with their voice because they think visibility equals influence. They're wrong. Watch what happens in your next meeting or group conversation. Someone makes a statement, and immediately 3 people jump in with their thoughts. Your instinct is to immediately defend it, to explain why they're wrong, to keep talking until they understand. When you comment on everything, agree with everyone, and fill every silence, you're devaluing your own voice. It signals that your mental resources are valuable and not automatically available to everyone who wants them. Most importantly, it gives you time to respond from a position of strength rather than react from impulse. When you speak with purpose after genuine consideration, people lean in. They don't feel compelled to have an opinion on everything. But here's what's really happening. While everyone else is fighting for airtime, you're establishing yourself as someone whose words have weight. You're training people to pay attention when you speak because you don't speak unless you have something worth saying. They listen more than they speak, and when they do speak, it matters. That's not personality, that's strategy. Instead, you pause. You look at them directly. You take a moment to actually consider what they said. Then you respond with intention. That's an interesting perspective. Let me think about that. The room shifts. Suddenly, you're not reactive, you're strategic. The person who commands respect in that room is the one who pauses, who listens completely, who lets the silence hang for just a beat longer than feels comfortable before they respond. When they finally speak, everyone listens, because their words carry weight. They've trained people to value their input by making it scarce. Machiavelli wrote that, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This is the psychology of strategic silence. When you rush to respond, to fill gaps, to add your voice to every conversation, you appear eager and available. When you pause, consider, and speak only when you have something substantial to contribute, you appear thoughtful and selective. That perception creates respect. Here's how this works practically. Someone criticizes your idea in a meeting. This isn't about being rude or dismissive. It's about understanding that your responses are currency, and currency only has value when it's not unlimited. The silent strategy works because it forces others to work for your attention instead of assuming they have it. Think about the most respected leaders you know personally or have observed. They don't jump into conversations immediately. This is uncomfortable at first because silence feels like lost opportunity. Here's what Machiavelli knew that most people refuse to accept. Respect only comes to those willing to take calculated risks that others won't take. Not reckless gambles, but strategic moves that separate you from the crowd of people playing it safe. Every respected person you know has this in common. At some point, they made a move that others thought was too bold, too risky, or too controversial. They disagreed with their boss when everyone else stayed quiet. They proposed the solution others were afraid to suggest. They took responsibility for the outcome when everyone else was looking for someone else to blame, not in an aggressive or confrontational way, but with the kind of directness that makes uncomfortable truths impossible to ignore. I think we need to acknowledge that our current approach isn't working, and here's what I suggest we do differently. You don't speak up just to hear your own voice or to prove how brave you are. In social situations, it's being willing to express an unpopular but thoughtful opinion. The calculated risk is about reading the situation accurately, understanding the stakes, and being willing to act when you have genuine value to add, even when it's uncomfortable. In relationships, it's having difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. In any group dynamic, it's being the person who's willing to address what everyone else pretends not to notice. You identify moments where your insight or action could genuinely move things forward, and you're willing to be accountable for the outcome. The mistake most people make is thinking that keeping your head down and avoiding conflict builds respect. It doesn't. It builds invisibility. It shows you have convictions worth defending and the courage to act on them. Most importantly, it proves you're someone who takes responsibility rather than just along for the ride. Machiavelli wrote that, "He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation." Once people see you're willing to take thoughtful risks, they start viewing you as someone who makes things happen rather than someone who just reacts to what others do. Your team is struggling with a problem that everyone knows exists, but no one wants to address directly. Maybe it's a process that doesn't work, a colleague who isn't pulling their weight, or a strategy that's clearly failing. Everyone complains privately but stays silent publicly. This is your moment. Translation: playing it safe is actually the riskiest strategy of all because it guarantees you will be overlooked. Here's how this shows up in real situations. The calculated risk is being the person who names the problem clearly and proposes a solution. Most people avoid this because they're terrified of being wrong or creating conflict. But here's what they don't understand. Even if your solution isn't perfect, you've just demonstrated leadership. You've shown you're willing to take ownership of difficult situations rather than hoping someone else will handle them. That's exactly what creates respect. The key is making sure your risks are calculated, not impulsive. This principle extends beyond work into every area where you want respect. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the bold, but he also emphasized that boldness without wisdom is just recklessness. People respect those who are willing to stick their neck out because it demonstrates strength of character. The respect that comes from calculated risk-taking is permanent, because it's based on demonstrated character rather than superficial charm. This is the hardest truth about respect, and it's going to challenge everything you've been taught about being a good person. Machiavelli discovered that the people who try to help everyone end up respected by no one. It's not because helping is wrong, it's because helping without boundaries destroys your value. Here's the paradox. The more available you make yourself to everyone, the less anyone values your help. When you're the person who always says yes, who drops everything to solve other people's problems, who never pushes back on unreasonable requests, you think you're building goodwill. You're actually building contempt. If it was someone who rarely asks for anything, someone whose time you respect, you probably felt honored they came to you. When you help selectively, you're signaling that your time has value, and you're choosing to invest it in this person or situation. Choice creates value. If your attention, your time, your expertise, and your support are always available to everyone, then they're worth nothing to anyone. It means asking yourself, will helping in this situation actually make a meaningful difference, or am I just helping to feel needed? It means understanding that saying no to some people allows you to say yes more meaningfully to others. But if those same resources are carefully managed and strategically deployed, they become highly valued. Automatic availability destroys it. They say no to good opportunities so they can say yes to great ones. When they do help, it means something. Because their help isn't automatic. They start approaching you more thoughtfully. They value your input more highly because they know it's not automatic. Your help becomes a gift rather than an expectation. And gifts create respect in a way that obligations never can. If it was someone who asks everyone for everything, you probably felt annoyed. That's the difference between strategic helpfulness and desperate people-pleasing. They help powerfully when they choose to help, but they don't help just because someone asks. They understand that their willingness to help means more when it's not guaranteed. Machiavelli wrote that, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel." What people see when you help everyone is someone with no standards, no priorities, and no sense of their own worth. What they feel is that your time and energy must not be very valuable if you give it away so freely. Think about the last time someone asked you for a favor. At work, the person who takes on every project isn't seen as dedicated. They're seen as someone who can't prioritize. The person who carefully chooses which initiatives to support is seen as strategic. In relationships, the person who's always available isn't seen as loving. They're seen as needy. The person who maintains their own life and interests is seen as valuable. They evaluate requests based on whether they align with their values, their priorities, and their capacity to actually make a difference. The respected person helps selectively. This shows up everywhere in life. When you help indiscriminately, you're signaling that you don't have anything more important to do with your time. Here's what's really happening psychologically. Machiavelli understood that respect comes from being seen as someone whose resources are limited and therefore precious. This doesn't mean being selfish or cruel. It means being intentional about where you invest your energy. The people who command real respect are known for their boundaries as much as their generosity. When you start helping selectively, something interesting happens. People stop taking your assistance for granted. Here's Machiavelli's ultimate principle that guarantees permanent respect. You must be willing to walk away from any situation where your value is unrecognized. This is the move that separates people who are respected from people who are tolerated, and most people will never do it because it requires genuine courage. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be impetuous than cautious because fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under it, is necessary to beat and ill-use her. He wasn't talking about violence against women. He was using the language of his time to describe a timeless truth. Respect comes to those who are willing to risk losing what they have, rather than accept being undervalued. I guarantee they've walked away from something that others would have accepted. They turned down a job that didn't meet their standards. They ended a relationship that wasn't serving them. When someone consistently disrespects your time, you stop making yourself available to them. When people know they can treat you poorly and you'll still be there, your presence has no value. The people who command lifelong respect are those who have proven over time that they won't accept being undervalued. They don't fight for respect, they simply remove themselves from situations where it's not present. When people realize that treating you poorly means losing access to you, suddenly they start treating you differently, not because they've become better people, but because they've learned that disrespecting you has consequences. Leave a comment below telling me which of these 5 moves you're going to implement first. Are you going to stop trying so hard to be liked? Start using strategic silence? Take that calculated risk you've been avoiding? Set boundaries around your help? Or demonstrate your willingness to walk away? Tell me in the comments because I read every single one, and your commitment to action is what separates viewers who just consume content from those who actually transform their lives. Hit that like button if you're serious about commanding respect rather than just hoping for it. And subscribe with the notification bell on because I share strategies like this regularly that most people will never discover on their own. Remember, respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you earn through strategic action. Now go make it happen. When someone takes credit for your work, you stop collaborating with them, not through manipulation or game playing, but through genuine self-respect that's demonstrated through your willingness to remove yourself from situations that don't honor your worth. People remember and respect those who respect themselves enough to walk away when necessary. When someone treats you as optional, you make yourself unavailable. They left a social group that didn't appreciate their contributions. They realize you're not someone who can be manipulated, taken for granted, or treated carelessly. They understand that access to you is a privilege that can be revoked, which makes them value it properly. That willingness to walk away is what created their reputation for being someone who can't be taken advantage of. The final move is this. You must demonstrate that you would rather have nothing than accept less than your worth. This isn't about arrogance or ultimatums. You might lose the job. The relationship might end. The social group might not chase after you. But here's what Machiavelli knew. Living without respect is worse than living without the people who refuse to give it to you. The respect you gain by being willing to walk away opens doors to relationships and opportunities where your value is recognized from the start. This is about having such a clear understanding of your value that you're genuinely prepared to remove yourself from situations that don't honor it. Think about the most respected person in your professional or personal life. This move works because it forces others to confront the reality of what they would lose if you weren't there. When you're always available, always accommodating, always willing to accept whatever treatment you receive, people never have to consider your absence. When you demonstrate that your participation isn't guaranteed, suddenly your presence becomes valuable. Here's how this plays out in real situations. Your boss consistently dismisses your ideas but expects you to implement everyone else's. Your friends always expect you to adjust your schedule, but never accommodate yours. Your colleagues take credit for work you contributed to. The final move is being genuinely prepared to remove yourself from these dynamics rather than continuing to accept them. This isn't about making threats or creating drama. It's about quietly and consistently demonstrating through your actions that you have standards. The psychological principle here is, scarcity creates value. Machiavelli understood that respect is never given freely. It's earned through consistent demonstration of self-worth. This final move requires the most courage because it means being comfortable with uncertainty. When you consistently demonstrate that your respect for yourself is non-negotiable, others begin to respect you the same way. This is how you lock in lifelong respect. If this strategy resonates with you and you can see how it would transform your relationships and career, I need you to do something right now.